Hey folks, Terry with TwoHubs.com. For those of you who might have seen my review of the original Wilier 0.7, may recall how I described the bike as being perfection. I did everything well, very well. The next generation of the 0.7 has arrived, the 2015 0.7. So why don't you hang out with me for a bit so we can find out whether Wilier was able to outperform themselves. Now, in the category of high-end superbikes, you'll find manufacturers try to focus on four major criteria. You have stiffness, you have weight, you have aerodynamics, and you have compliance or comfort. Now, normally manufacturers will be able to kind of focus on and maybe get two, maybe 2.5, sometimes in rare cases 3 of those. Well, since the introduction of the original 0.7, Wilier is being quite greedy, and they wanted to encompass all 4 criteria, and that is the goal of the 2015 Wilier 0.7. So now let's figure out how they're able to do that. Now, at first glance, just looking at the 2015 0.7, it's got significantly less volume and girth to it than its predecessor. And just our initial impressions were, well, Wilier really wanted to focus on compliance and in dropping the weight. But that's certainly not true, because they did not want to give up at all in the department of stiffness, torsional rigidity. The way that they were able to accomplish this basically starts from the inside. You got to look at it from the inside out here. They start with a thermoplastic interior liner, and what they do is they inject the bladders into that liner to basically evenly distribute the very high modulus 60-ton carbon throughout the frame. So they're not having to use excess carbon and other materials in certain junctions, as you would see on other frames. So it's basically tuned from the inside out to retain stiffness, and the added benefit, or byproduct obviously, is that they're able to cut down on weight. Now, the engineers at Wilier have focused a lot of attention here on the front end of the bike. You'll notice that the top tube, as it approaches the head tube, it slopes downward, and what it does is it meets the top of the head tube flush. And the reason they did this by squaring it off like that was to basically reduce any flexion between the head tube and the top tube of the bike. So that is done for stiffness. And it shares some aerodynamic cues that you find in the Cento Air in its hourglass-shaped head tube, and also the integration here between the top of the down tube and the crown of the fork. Now, moving down here to the fork, you'll find that the fork itself is a different shape from its predecessor. The original 0.7 was curved in its design, and in an effort to improve stiffness and stability, Wilier for 2015 has now moved to a straight-bladed arrow fork. Now, moving to the hindquarters of the 2015 0.7, you'll quickly see that Wilier has transitioned to a much smaller seat tube and seat post. Consequently, they've left the 31.6 millimeter behind, and they've moved on to a 27.2 millimeter seat post. And that is to, well, it certainly helps them cut down on weight and also make the ride a little bit more comfortable. That is also complemented by the very small, in comparison to its predecessor, seat stays here. I want to say they're almost micro in their description. And this had us kind of questioning the design when we first saw pictures of the new 0.7. We thought, I don't know about the stiffness of this frame, which is usually one of our primary concerns. However, they were able to pull this off here by what's going on beneath here. You'll see that they're using a BB386 bottom bracket section here, and that moves straight back into some hefty chainstays which are asymmetric in their design. You'll find the dry side chainstay slopes downward, well below the line of the non-dry side chainstay, and that is to counteract chain torque. So they've really tied everything well together here in the back of the frame through some really keen engineering to preserve some compliance, but not giving an inch in terms of preserving torsional rigidity. Now, as I previously mentioned, Wilier utilized 60-ton, very high modulus carbon throughout the 0.7 to generate a lot of stiffness, all in the name of performance, and also to keep weight down. But unlike most frames where they're basically sandwiching a more standard carbon with high modulus carbon in the sake of having a compliant layer between the two higher levels of carbon. What they're doing here is they're utilizing SEI as they did in its predecessor. That's called Special Elastic Infiltrated Film. So they're using a vibration absorbent film in between the two carbon layers, and what that allows them to do is make the ride quality so smooth while cutting down on average about 150 to 200 grams of weight. Now just a few frame highlights here before I conclude. It does have a tapered head steer tube. All the cables are routed internally on this bike, unlike its predecessor, so everything is tucked inside to further take advantage of aerodynamics. Price remains unchanged, which is great news. Now, as far as what this bike is going to accomplish for you, remember at the beginning when I said the 4 goals were the stiffness, the aerodynamics, the lightweight package, and the compliance. This bike is going to perform and continue to perform no matter what you put it through. Whether climbing, seated, out of the saddle, sprinting, the bike's it's gonna shine. And this is a super bike and arguably the best out there right now. It is a very stable bike, so when you do edge out your friends or competitors at the top of a climb, you're going to be able to descend with confidence, which is really important. And not to mention, it is a very, very smooth riding bike due to its design and composition, if you will. So I wouldn't be hesitant to take it on an entertaining double century ride with your friends in the off season. Well, thanks for hanging out with me here, and I hope you enjoyed our review of the 2015 Wilier 0.7. If you have any questions about Wilier bikes, you know how to reach us at 2hubs.com. That's info@2hubs.com. Now, if you really want one of these new 0.7s, just remember, it's always easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Make sure you enjoy the ride.